rate in which technology is evolving, this episode is a reminder of keeping the human element at the forefront of whatever it is that we're doing, whether it's we're developing a product, implementing a digital business transformation project, or just helping everyone navigate the future of work and what that looks like, especially when there are different working models, such as not having to do your traditional 9 to 5 just to be productive and effective. Let's dive. Welcome back to another episode of The Leader Within. Today, I'm excited to introduce Kamales Lardi, CEO of Lardi Partner Consulting. She has over 24 years of experience in digital and business transformation, has advised numerous multinational companies across various industries in Europe, Asia, and Africa. And given her extensive experience, she's received numerous accolades, including top 10 global influencers and thought leaders in digital transformation. Given her experience, I'm excited to have her share her insights with you. Well, welcome, Kamales. Can you share with us a story about how it's shaped the trajectory of your career and consulting practice?
It's a pleasure to join you here today, Angela. I'm so happy to be here with you. I've heard some of your podcasts, so I'm very excited to share my story as well. If I start from the very beginning, I have been in the technology industry since I would say the early 90s. I started my career off in the late 90s as a programmer, actually. And that was back in the times when technology was not so user-friendly, so coding was like learning a new language all on its own. It was a very exciting time because there was a lot of developments happening within the technology space. And so I was incredibly passionate about hardcore coding and tech development, and I was fascinated with what could potentially be done with technology in our business and in our lives. I very quickly moved into management consulting and business advisory. I started off with Accenture. I was there for a number of years. And then I found this passion for engaging with organizations and working with people from different functions and different business areas and bridging that gap between technology and business outcome. And so that's where I started off in management consulting. I worked with companies like Deloitte as well. I was the head of Deloitte Digital in Switzerland. And somewhere around 2012, January or February 2012, I decided to start my own consulting company based out of Switzerland. And since then, I have to say it's been a fantastic ride. I've had the opportunity to work with companies all over the world, work with different industries from private sector as well as the public sector. And I've implemented all kinds of projects ranging from strategic implementations all the way up to technology implementations and operational execution. And so it's been a fantastic journey. And in this time, I've also gained a huge amount of learnings. I can say that my approach to consulting and my leadership style has also completely transformed from where I was probably 20 years ago, and the beliefs and values I had back then to what I am today. That's completely transformed. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that I've engaged with people from across the world. And I've learned that there are some elements of the human side of technology that are so critical that as a technologist, I've almost had to become a people expert in that sense as well. And so this has been the exciting journey that I've had over the years. I've also done teaching. So I'm a teaching fellow at different universities in the UK and Switzerland. And I've published a book quite recently, which was the human side of digital business transformation.
Okay, first of all, kudos to you for taking on that challenge back then, right? When you said, again, becoming a programmer at that time, whole different ballpark compared to what it is now. And then, of course, climbing the corporate ladder through different industries across the world as well. And I kind of want to double click into the comment you made about as your journey progressed, your leadership in terms of beliefs, values, how you approach it has transformed with you, right? So having that global experience, like what does leadership look like to you now? And how would you kind of look back and be like, okay, like this is kind of the framework that I adopted the way that has been consistent as well, but it's just these elements around it has shifted.
If I reflect back in the consulting industry and the technology industry, I think there's always been, and I came up in consulting in a time when management consulting and advisory was in its heyday, right? So in the 90s, early 2000s. And a lot of what I learned growing up in that industry was client engagement in that traditional form, prioritizing sales, prioritizing outcomes or financial outcomes. I worked with a lot of people who were rewarded for financial outcomes despite behavior and despite values. And one of the things that I realized over the years is implementing technology, implementing these business solutions. At the core of it is the human values or the people, right? At the end of the day, there cannot be success in anything that we implement unless we are successful with the people that we're implementing it for and with. And so one of my biggest learnings, I think, was coming away from that traditional consulting industry, leaving the big four environment, the big four management consulting environment, and starting my own business. I started off Lardi Partner Consulting on my own. At the time, I had just given birth to my daughter. She was probably about a couple of months old. And I was told by everyone around me, you're not going to be successful. This is going to be too difficult to implement. It's going to be too difficult to sell and convince clients that you're going to bring value as a consultant. And so I took it on as a challenge, and I said to myself, I'm do or die, right? So I'm going to go out there, I'm going to do my best and see what happens. Worst case scenario, fall flat on my face, and I go back to looking for a job. But it has been successful. The journey has been 12 years long. And I think working with people as a consultant, but also an entrepreneur, I've realized that you have to engage with people on a very authentic and human level. And this means, for example, approaching a client, it's so important to first understand and engage and kind of connect with people. And if there's that connection and there's a mutual understanding of what your business challenges are, what your role challenges are, I can better help you as a consultant, as a technologist as well. And what I do find these days is my leadership style and my engagement style has transformed to a point where I'm very quickly able to identify red flags with clients as well. And so I don't work with people that I know, okay, this isn't going to work out, or this is going to be a challenging situation where the value isn't going to be the core of what we're going to be focusing on. And so I'm quite hard on that rule in terms of, not working with people who are badly behaved as well. And we do find some of that in the business world as well as in.
Hey, you know what? Kudos to you for that. And I want to dive a little bit deeper into one thing we've chatted about before. And because when you said, hey, I was going out and I was going to start my own practice, and a lot of people like, don't do it, right? Especially being a visible minority within the space that you were at that time. And so one of the comments that you had made is like how being different by design has helped you push boundaries that you otherwise wouldn't have been able to in your career. And so can you elaborate how comment plus your diverse experience with different countries and industries has shaped your approach to creating value for clients?
Definitely. I think it's been almost an advantage, the fact that I am different by design. I do operate mainly in a very non-diverse environment or homogeneous environment in terms of having companies and engaging with leaders, engaging with people who are not going to see me as a traditional management consultant and as a business owner. And so this has been, I have to say, 12 years ago, I was probably a lot more naive. I didn't recognize that this was an issue. So I would bulldoze into situations, engage with clients, completely blind of the fact that they might see me as someone different. It was all about, driving value and delivering projects and engaging and building my portfolio. And so these days, I think over the last 12 years, I've developed and grown, and I've become a lot more aware some of the nuances of the interactions that I have with clients. And I think this has informed me a lot more, and I recognize a lot more the signs when I'm working in an environment where I'm actually working around here, or there's something different going on here. And I think this is exciting. So in Switzerland and even in Central Europe, it'll be quite challenging to find women of color who are leading consulting, leading technology. There are very few of us. And I think it's very, very important to represent in this environment. And the only way to break those perceptions and mindsets and transform the way people see people of color, women of color in the tech industry is to really have representation and to show that there's a range of different kinds of people working in this space. I used to joke around with colleagues in the past, programmers or tech leaders, they come in skirts and high heels as well, right? So this is a very important visual to have in the technology.
Okay, I appreciate that. And another thing that came to mind as you're talking about that is I know within Canada, sometimes employers or leaders will be like, well, you know what? They don't have Canadian experience, therefore, I don't know if it'd be a good fit, right? But you've just proven through your experience, right, about how being different by design actually can be beneficial. As an individual in a position where you've had to hire and be a leader in those things, what would you say is like one of your biggest thoughts when it comes to diversity in technology then?
I'm actually a really strong, passionate believer about diversity of thought in tech. It's such a critical element, particularly in the area that we are now, or the space that we are now today, where AI is, exploding across industries and applications are kind of developing across different areas. Diversity of thought, and let me clarify what I mean by that. It isn't just about gender diversity or cultural diversity. It is having people coming in from different age groups, different sexual orientations, different backgrounds, different cultures, all of these mix of backgrounds coming together to create and deliver, as well as use technology that can transform our lives. And that's so critical because if you have a subset of people, and I've seen this demonstration because I've implemented technology across various business areas, I've seen this in practice where people do tend to be blindsided or not see differences because we're so used to our own experience, right? So there is a visual cognitive bias where we don't recognize the needs and preferences of people that are not the same as us. And this isn't a bad thing. It isn't a negative thing that many people might think, oh, cognitive bias or being biased is negative. It isn't. It's just a human. And it's a very critical fact to be aware of when we're building tech solutions that are going to be used across various industries like financial services, healthcare, and so on. We need to be able to recognize that we are biased in terms of not recognizing the experiences of people that are not similar to us. And that happens also with people of color, with people of any background. And having groups of people who are diverse will help open up our mindset towards the types of technologies that we're building. Are we building it to service the masses, or are we building the tech solutions to serve a subset of the society? And this is where diversity of thought comes in. It's such a critical element. And we are finding that's a struggle. That's a huge gap at the moment. And so having, this passion for diversity of thought, I think every time I speak, every time I engage with clients, every time we present something, I try to bring in this element. We need to make sure that we are considering that aspect of diversity. And unfortunately, Angela, I think today the word diversity has almost become a negative term. We see many companies reacting to it. We see that in the news, in the political fronts as well. And I think that's the challenge that we're going to be facing, particularly in the tech industry, to make sure that this element is not lost as we move forward.
I appreciate the call out about just how diversity being actually pretty triggering for some leaders and organizations right now, and it's almost it can be crippling at times because you don't know what to do or say that is right or wrong. Like there's a lot to that, right? And I guess if there was one call to action for you, because you basically highlighted, right? It's not just about your skin color, your age, etc. It's actually pretty like multifaceted, right? So if there's one call to action for those who are developing programs and those who are leading, it's just what would that be as we continue to go forward with implementing technology and keeping humans at the forefront of everything that we're doing?
If there's one thing I would pick out, it would probably be for people to be aware and recognize that they do have this limiting view of things, right? So to have this abundance mindset, I would say. And so leadership teams, for example, tend to be, it's human nature, right? If we think about how we as human beings behave, we like the things that are familiar to us and similar to us. And the only way to break that and to become more open is to become aware of that and to say, okay, now I've got to very proactively select something that's not in my current realm of experience. And so my call to action for leadership teams, for tech teams, for business teams would be really be open to that new thing, right? And this could be a range of different things. It's not just about diverse teams. It could be also being open to new ways of doing things. For example, new working models. This is a topic that's of huge discussion at the moment across the globe. And I think just that openness to consider, okay, where did our working models come from? It's part of what I've written about in my book. I think the working models that we have today, the 9 to 5, 40-hour weeks, originated from Henry Ford's factories. That's where it started, and we still practice that today in 2024. And so we're kind of sticking to something that's traditional and has been around for a long time. And some of the reasonings that we find for something like this, when I speak to business leaders, they say, well, this is how we've always done it. And for me, that's not a good enough reason, right? So now as we move into the digital space, as we become more accustomed to the digital economy, and we see that our future in business as well as our own personal future is going to be more embedded in technology and digital, we need to start thinking about new working models, new ways of doing things, flexibility and dynamism. And all of this comes into the aspect of abundance thinking. And abundance thinking is really about not limiting yourself to what was, but allowing yourself to think beyond what is today.
Okay, you touched on something that I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into is that new working model piece, right? I'm curious, like, what is a trend that you're focusing on right now that you're like, you know what, it could make its way from Europe to North America? Because that's why where I find is most of these trends is we're paying attention to what Europe is doing. And then eventually, a very long time later, we're going to start adopting it, right? But yeah, I'm curious because you did say 9 to 5 is like very, very old. And even with the way that technology is being implemented right now, it's like we don't need to be doing 40 to 80 hours a week in a 9 to 5 role or whatever it may be. But yeah, I would love to hear again from you. What is a new working model that you're paying attention to right now?
So working models, I think in Europe, what we've seen is people are looking for far more work-life balance, and that's just exponentiated since COVID. We're seeing this as well with the younger generation, right? The millennials triggered this shift in mindset, and now we have the Gen Zs, and we're really going towards this elements of making sure that we are doing things that align with our purpose, that we are, if we're spending time in the day working on something, it has to be purposeful and has to be meaningful for us. So we're seeing this mindset shift happen. And I think COVID did create this or trigger this break in perception where people don't feel they need to go into working environments and be physically present anymore to do the work that they used to do. And one of the big trends that we're seeing, particularly with entrepreneurs, I wouldn't say so much with the bigger companies or even the small, medium companies, we're seeing entrepreneurs creating these combination of teams, right? Virtual teams, remote teams, hybrid teams. My company is a fully virtual organization. So my team is fully virtual. We come together as and when required for a project or an engagement. Most of our interactions are online. So a good example of this is I've worked with one particular person who's located in India for the last 2 years. I've met her once and for the first time in January. And now we're coming together again in August for another project. So it's almost as if we're breaking this perception that you need to have physical engagement with people. But we're not replacing that physical engagement. We're making digital and the combination interactions and touch points more meaningful. So if I do engage with her online, we still have these meaningful conversations. We engage on a deeper level. We try very hard to get to know each other to a point where if there's an issue, she feels comfortable enough to speak to me about it. And we can discuss things and we can work on things together. And I think this is so important. It isn't about replacing that physical touch point. It's about making every single touch point meaningful in a way that it doesn't matter if you're digital or physical, right? You're still delivering value and outcome. So this is one big trend that we're seeing. I do speak to a number of entrepreneurs who say, we don't want to work in that traditional model, and going into the office is for losers, and these sort of sentences being said around me. So I find that very fascinating. I think the traditional working model is shifting towards a hyper-personalized working model where every individual wants to design their environment, design their work-life balance, design the revenue generation or revenue streams that they are involved in a way that suits their lifestyle. And I find this quite exciting, to be honest, because it's breaking traditional ways of doing things and we're building more meaningful interactions. So that's
Okay, I appreciate that visual. And one thing that I actually had a thought of this past weekend was the number of individuals that are in poverty right now over here, whether it's because they are over age 55 and or they don't have the enough capacity during the day because they're a caregiver or whatever it may be to actually do your traditional 9 to 5 jobs. I was like, can you imagine if an entrepreneur just came up with a different like flexible model where it's like, you know what, like I have an X amount of positions that are like these odd hours and then X amount of positions that are these, because a lot of these individuals can only do part-time work. And then you start engaging these demographics and then how it would actually stimulate the economy. Like, I'm like, what, like maybe that's a utopian thought, but like when we think about just how we can have more flexibility these days, I think it's worth having those questions at the forefront of our minds, right? So I'm going to switch gears a little bit with you. And so you are amazing at digital business transformation and managing the human side of it. So let's do a very macro overview of just the organization, the leader, and the individual, right? How does that process look like? So let's start with the organizational level. One of the things that you take the approach of is developing a clear value proposition. So can you kind of jump into what that means when it comes to developing that and how it ties into a successful digital business transformation?
The most important part, and I actually just saw a report from Gartner that mentioned how do you implement AI within an organization. And they started from the point of saying, find your use case for technology for AI, and then define value and so on and so forth. And that's one of the things that I completely disagree with. And that's one of the things, not necessarily disagreeing with Gartner, they're fantastic. We use a lot of their research, the starting point. And this is where value proposition comes. Every single organization we work with, we start off from what is the value you want to deliver for the business? Really identifying the business aspect of things. So are you looking at revenue generation, or are you looking at growth? Are you looking at optimization of operations, cost reduction, productivity, whatever that may be? We start from the value that we want to deliver. And then we go into how does the technology today deliver value there? Which of these technologies can deliver value, and how can we implement that in a successful way to make sure it fits this current business environment? And I think that's the most critical element, looking at your unique business environment, the industry that you're in, how your company operates, what is the DNA of the company, right? The culture, systems, processes. So we do a deep dive into the organization to understand the unique aspects of that organization. We identify what are the goals they need to achieve, what are the goals they want to achieve, and then test the technology solutions according to that. And oftentimes it's not just the tech that can deliver this. Sometimes it could be a culture change initiative. Other times it could be business process optimization, or it could be upskilling of people. So when you talk about digital transformation, it's really a range of different elements. It's a fairly broad area, but it's truly an organization-wide transformation or evolution process that utilizes technology to deliver, capture, and create value for the organization. So it's a very broad space. And I think the aspect of value proposition, starting from what we want to deliver for the business, is the most unique.
Okay, appreciate that. And then now that we've developed that clear value proposition, now it's time to bring the key stakeholders on board, right? So for leaders who are kind of going against the grain and like, I don't really want to do this, right? Yet you have your sponsors that are, no, we're going to do this. How do you bring those leaders on board as you go on this journey?
The leadership level is probably the most important and most critical level to work with. There's got to be someone in that leadership structure that's bought into the process and understands what needs to happen. And, I've implemented transformation and technology initiatives, I would say over 50 projects in the last 12 years. And the one thing that I noticed is you can start grassroots, you can start with employee transformation and start from the bottom up, but the outcome is limited, the value is limited. You can't get to an organization-wide value and sustainable value unless you have the leadership teams on board. So we often do start working with the C-level executives who are board members and with upper level management to help them, first of all, understand and come on the same page around what the transformation is. I recently had an engagement with a luxury brand that completely disagreed with the use of the term transformation. For them, transformation was just wrong because it means you're going from one to another. Whereas when we talk about transformation, we're talking about an evolutionary process. And so fundamental things like terminology. So getting that leadership mindset into a space where they understand this needs to get the traditional way of doing things is not going to last or not going to bring value in the digital economy, and having them transform with the process of the organization transformation is so important. One good way of doing this is typically when I deal with leadership teams, we have digital mindset coaching that I have. It's a program that we do for leadership teams to help them understand the new ways of leading organizations, the new traits and capabilities or characteristics of leaders in the digital economy. And I often find there's two reasons why leadership team members don't come along with this transformation process. One is there's a fear, right? Either fear of losing control, fear of having to do things a different way, fear of not having the right skill sets or not having the right technical or technology capabilities. So this fear element is so important. Another is this lack of commitment towards the long-term structure of the organization. So oftentimes, invalid implementation could be a 6-month project or a 1-year project, and you tick a box and say something tangible has been implemented, my work is done, right? And in 10 years, I'm not going to be around here anymore, or in 5 years, I'm going to be in a different job. So this lack of commitment, I think recognizing which of these elements are motivating those leadership team members, where is the issue or challenge, that's the first step. And that's the human aspect, recognizing what that personal barrier to motivation is. And once we recognize that, it's then simple, or, well, not necessarily simple, but it's then we know exactly how to address it. Right? Fear factors are probably a little bit easier to handle if there's an education gap in terms of the technical skills, or if there's a fear of losing control. Those elements can be managed. The lack of commitment element then come in with incentives and motivations that allow them to commit to that short term. And so it's really a game of just understanding people and how people operate and what motivates them, and then driving that.
Okay, you've covered the organization and the leadership piece, and which has a level of that individual component to it, right? And now I want to dive specifically into the individual piece because you started a digital transformation school, right? It's called DBX, and I'll have the link and everything below, right? How does this tie into bringing the individuals and leaders along the journey of everything that you just described now?
The individual aspect is very similar to the leadership aspect, but what we've noticed in recent years, what we've captured in terms of the education courses that we have online, is there's 2 elements that we are dealing with. One is the wider workforce when it comes to transformation. Organizations and people are built to maintain the status quo. We don't like change as human beings. We like things to stay the same, and we like things to stay secure and stable and comfortable for us. There are a few people, or a subset of people, who like this constant change, or they are thrilled by transformation and change as consistency. But most people like things to stay the same. And so one of the things that we do as people and as communities within organizations, the workforce, we resist change. Whenever there's a new element coming in, whenever there's something that's questionable, we push against it, and we say we don't want this change or uncertainty to impact us. So this is what we call the amygdala response, right? It's that fight, flight, or freeze response that we have. We find this so common within digital transformation and technology implementations, where you have people reacting in a similar way. So if you implement a tech, for example, within a team environment, you'll have some people who would push against it and resist it, the fight response. You have some people who would then say, this is not the place for me anymore, I'm going to withdraw, and then I'm going to leave. And then you have other people who freeze and put their heads down and say, I'm going to wait till this blows over and see how it goes. And so it's so important to recognize these different reactions and understand why people react in such a way, and how we can address that to create that comfort level for what we're implementing. We also have this element of the psychology of transformation that looks at how teams implement change within organizations. And this is so crucial, right? So things like bystander effect, where in a team where we're working with a team of people who are implementing a tech, you might have some people who decide to step aside and wait and say, I'm not going to make a decision, I'm not going to step in, I'm not going to participate, and it's not my responsibility. But you might have system justifying beliefs, where people look at their environment and they might not want to recognize the challenges that they're facing or the problems in their current business environment. They just continue with the status quo and just saying, this is how we've always done it, we're not going to change that. You might have even aversion to failure. And this is so interesting to recognize with people, because you have teams that I've worked with in the past who have this aversion to failure. Even if you demonstrate to them there could be a significant positive outcome from this implementation, there's this fear of this little bit of risk that things might go wrong, or things might, has gone wrong in the past, and I don't want to repeat that. And so they resist completely. And so this aversion to failure is a big one that we deal with as well. And so recognizing these different psychology elements around transformation, and recognizing how teams make decisions, There could be, for example, a team of business owners or business people who are working with the IT team. And the business people might say, I'm not going to decide on this, or I'm going to decide whatever the IT team says is the best solution. We're just going to go with that. Whereas there might be individuals within that group who say, we need to challenge the IT and do something different, but they don't have a strong enough voice. And so all of these nuances I find very interesting. And this is the human side of digital business transformation. We've captured all of these learnings and these elements that we've experienced over the years, and we've put that into an online training course on the DBX school, the Digital Business Transformation.
I'm so excited to dive into that because you've had so much real world experience plus research. Right? There's so many different elements that go into that. And so as we slowly wrap up our conversation, what's the first thing that comes to mind for the following? What does it take to unleash the potential of individuals and organizations?
When you talk about unleash the potential, probably I can reflect back on some of the experiences I've had within different organizational environments. I see sometimes people get excited and motivated when we are able to understand them at a deeper level. So having, first of all, an understanding for what they stand for or what they believe in or what might be a fear factor for them. So the first step is this active listening, active understanding of an individual. And the second step, I would say, finding that shared purpose and value. And this is something that also works for me personally. When there's something that I believe in and I have this shared purpose within a structure or an organization, it's so motivating and it's so exciting. And you want to go above and beyond and deliver on that. And so whenever we work with technology or transformation initiatives, we often try to find this shared purpose and this shared element of the values that we can rely on or share. And I think this is where one of the initiatives, and it's also covered in our online course, one of the initiatives that we always start off with is let's try to identify the shared purpose of your organization so people can believe in what you're doing as a company. It's not just 9 to 5 work, but we're doing something more, and start from that point and really try to look at how we can unleash people's motivations.
I love that. And my last question to you is, what is one thing that's top of mind for you right now so that others can understand how they could potentially help you and or support you?
There are two things. So what's top of mind for me, and this is where I would look for support from the global community of people who are your listeners. I think there is a values gap in the tech industry at the moment, where tech leaders are not demonstrating the values they need to be demonstrating. I've conducted a TEDx talk about this. It's on YouTube. So I go into detail about technology leaders need to demonstrate better values and accountability for what they're doing, particularly in this age of AI. And so I'm looking to engage with people further around how we can build better values in the tech industry and really put forward more leaders who are sharing these good values rather than leaders who are demonstrating for values. How I can help, if there's organizations out there, entrepreneurs out, anyone who's interested in learning more about technology, anyone who's interested in transformation for their business as well as for themselves. So I do conduct coaching sessions, as I said, digital mindset coaching for leaders. And this is an important element at the moment because leading teams that are hybrid, virtual, and remote, it's a new aspect that many leaders have to learn. How do you engage on these different channels to lead people who are of different models and structures? And we're entering into an age where you could potentially then start leading AI and digital employees as well. My company has a digital employee, and she's on our website. Her name is Anna, and she's 100% digital AI human. And her task is to introduce people who visit our website to our service offerings and tell them a little bit more about digital transformation. And so we're entering into a space where people are going to be working side by side with machines. And leaders need to understand how to manage this sort of environment. And so my passion is transformation and emerging tech and anything related to that.
Well, you know what? I feel like there's a lot of leaders that can benefit from that, and that's like a whole different talk in itself, right? So, Kamlesh, thank you so much for sharing your story and your insights. You've given us so many golden nuggets today. I appreciate you. And to everyone else that's tuned into another episode, thank you so much for your time and attention. It means more to me than you'll know, and I can't wait to stay in touch with you on my next episode.